Hi, I'm Brett Knowles from HireBook. I'd like to give you an overview of our amazing product, HireBook, and how it helps us engage employees and help companies and employees thrive in the organization. HireBook is a cloud-based tool which allows us to Hello, I'm Brett Knowles from HireBook. I'd like to give you a detailed walkthrough of how our amazing tool, HireBook, helps you engage employees and help both companies and employees thrive. Now, HireBook is a cloud-based tool that allows us to engage with employees, whether they be leadership or grassroots employees out in the field working remotely. HireBook is enabled through single security sign-on so that the right people get access to the right aspects of your business. As a quick heads up on the tool, navigation is straightforward. On the left side, we have the core chunks of functionality you can use. Take a look at performance by the organization chart, by objectives, down the detail with KPIs, and engage in the social network through check-ins and one-on-one meetings. Now, the amazing part about HireBook is how easy it is to onboard your organization. Literally, within a day, everyone can be up and running. We often advocate starting off with just a simple check-in. Imagine this Monday, you could send out a survey to every employee, understanding how they're feeling, and asking them a series of simple but well-architected questions that allow you to immediately get a feeling of how the whole organization is performing. What's interesting about this is this allows you to understand where the opportunities and issues are in your business. But at the same time, it opens them up to conversations and beginning to understand that performance isn't something that happens behind closed doors between an employee and the boss. But like playing any team sport or working in an orchestra, we work together as a team. We understand how everyone's performing, whether they're achieving their objectives, and if they're not, we understand what we can do to help them. So through these questions, we can begin to understand how individuals and teams are performing. And imagine if you had a concern about a team, sending out a survey just to that team to understand how that team is performing. You'd be able to take a look at that team and understand what the dynamics are and understand some of the feedback and questions that have been occurring. Let's take a look at that. Let's go back to that check-in. Now, I can understand the check-ins from people who report to me, and if I'm senior enough, I can see all check-ins. In this case, let's take a look at what Sam said. Sam is an HR specialist in our organization, and he submitted his survey. Now, Sam overall has given us 4 out of 5s. Now, this is important because we understand in the big picture how the employee is feeling. And they may have even put additional comments in here. And I may have observations to make. So I can add in follow-up comments and we can begin having a conversation through this tool or through the API integration with Teams and Slack and so forth. Or maybe my observations of concern enough, I want to add it to a one-on-one meeting. So in this way, I can take a look at topics and select items for our one-on-one agenda meeting. Or again, just have conversations back and forth, which we found to be super useful in this COVID world. And many times we see 3 or 4 notes going back and forth around issues as we begin to narrow in on topics. In this case, you can see that Sam's asked for my help as his leader to get the executive team's commitment to support the leadership training, which keeps on getting postponed. So I've now completed that review. And I've had a communication with Sam that allows him to understand that he can send up a signal for help and he'll receive it. We've broken that barrier about communication around performance. Now, maybe I feel that it's worth that one-on-one meeting. So if I go to the one-on-one section, I can see what one-on-ones have occurred and which ones are scheduled and which ones are draft. So this one is a draft that I've begun in the previous section. So now I can take a look at that. I can begin to schedule it, but also take a look at those comments which have been carried forward from the check-in. I can add other agenda items. I can add in my own notes, etc. So this allows us both to prepare for this one-on-one meeting. And that's important because now it becomes a lower risk for Sam and I to have that conversation. And more importantly, he's thought through what we might talk about. Now, as the quarter unfolds, these are archived, which means when you come to do your quarter end review, I can choose if I'm meeting up with any of my employees, which employee I'm going to meet with, and decide to take a look at all the completed reviews that we've done for the period of the quarter. So I no longer need to be keeping pieces of paper or notes on the employee conversations we've had. Both them and I can take a look at that before the quarter end conversation and remind ourselves of what's unfolded. Once you've established that risk-free pattern of communication about performance, you can begin to level up. You can add in objectives into the conversation. What's your strategic objectives? And people can just assess their scores by their performance by giving you a red, yellow, green. And eventually you can level up even a step further by adding in specific metrics, whether they're smart metrics like numbers, or project-based metrics like milestones, or budgets, or even burn downs in the agile world. So let's take a look at those. So on the objective side, I can see the objectives either as a list that I can drill through from the corporate objectives down to ones below, or if I'd like, I can see it as a tile view. And as you'd expect, I can take a look at the entire organization and I can drill through as far as I would like to understand how performance occurs in this organization. So this framework allows me to understand how the whole organization is performing no matter where I am in the organization. Now, this is useful to everyone to understand how their part of the organization is working and how it connects with the rest of the organization. So I can look at it in that hierarchy drill down view, or I can take a look at it in the tile view. And of course, as you'd expect for any one of these, if I chose to drill into more detail, I can easily click on it and understand that next level down. Now, other people like to see it in an organization chart format. So, same is available. I can take a look at the overall organization and understand how any one individual is performing. In this case, I can see both how he did on the pulse survey and how he's doing on his personal and team objectives. And as you'd expect, I can drill into those objectives. When I drill into them, not only do I get the actual performance numbers, but I can see his or her assessment and a commentary on what's been going on. What this allows me to do is easily take a look at the entire organization from my desktop and plan out my day on how it is I want to help the organization each day to achieve its performance goals. Now, I want to go into a little bit more detail about objectives and key results. Because although objectives and key results seem like a bunch of numbers and sort of left brain thinking about managing with facts and data, there's also explanations that are needed, the social connection, the detail behind it. So let's take a look at this particular objective. Now, it's a bit far down the page, so I'm just going to click on its parent and it will move it up to the top of the page. Now I got a little bit more space. Now, as I drill into it, I can see this particular objective, develop leadership skills, has two key results. All members must attend a virtual leadership seminar and the number of sessions that the leadership acts as a coach. Now, I can put in my results merely by clicking on the edit pencil, and I can key in the number of whatever the key result is that we're talking about, and a comment. Now, the comment is super important because the numbers doesn't tell the whole story. So in this case, maybe my comment is leaders keep getting pulled away from training. So now I understand a little bit more about what's happening. And this is super important because often the numbers don't tell the whole story. In fact, what we know is there's more to it than that, and maybe I want to understand the history, which I can get to by clicking on the activity log. Now, that opens up a detailed explanation of all the changes that have been done to the numbers, commentaries, and so forth. What's more interesting is I can also open up an assessment log. Now, this allows me to add on to this numerical interpretation of performance to provide insights around what we feel has been happening in association with this. So in this particular case, I can determine whether I think it's on track, behind, or at risk, and add in a commentary so that leadership understands where it is we have been thinking about the performance, what's occurred. Again, giving an explanation that goes beyond the raw numbers. Now, I just clicked on the Show All, which gives me the audit history that we talked about before in terms of the assessments, allows me to understand more about the objectives, but most importantly, allows me to set thresholds. When does this objective turn red, yellow, and green? Now, the default in the tool, of course, is Google's, where things, for example, turn green once we hit 70. But this allows you to configure this around your unique objectives so that they turn colors appropriately. But I need to emphasize, this is not artificial intelligence. Even though it guides us with what it thinks the colors might be, you as a leader get to overwrite that or put in your own assessment. So the system, based on your progress, may indicate that you're behind schedule based on the thresholds you've set. But you may know why that is and not be worried about it and set it to be green. In other words, I expect we'll be able to be on target by the end of the period. Or even red, to say the system says that we're slightly behind target, but I think this is seriously at risk. So in this way, between the smart numbers, the milestones, the budgets, the burn downs, your assessment, and your commentary, both at the data level and the objective level, allows leadership to understand what's happening across the organization even before we have the performance meeting. And this is super important. We find that that allows meetings to run about 25% less in duration, and that the decisions that make are about 80% more sustainable. In other words, when we take a look at those recommendations, they're actually implemented and drive benefits to the organization. So what we've talked about is the ability to onboard employees easily through surveys and check-ins. From there, gradually add in more detail through objectives and key results. And obviously what will happen is if you see performance issues, you may choose to then use a check-in for that team. Based on the check-in, arrange one-on-one meetings. What we've also seen is many times you want to drill into the detail and understand what's happening on a weekly or even a daily basis. And so we've added in KPI tracking. So now I can go into any part of the organization and assign and monitor activities down to the daily level. And this allows leaders to make sure that the actions they've agreed to in meetings are actually getting done. And as we have the next meeting, we can track to see what's happened to continually coach our teams going forward. So through HireBook, employees can understand their purpose, how they connect to the overall organization. Mastery, they can see how their training is progressing. Progress, they can see day-to-day movements of how they're progressing and how the work they and their teams are doing are moving the organization forward. Autonomy allows organizations, teams, and individuals to make decisions for themselves how to achieve those outcomes. And then finally, socialization. It gives us the platform to have these communications about performance and keep them in one place. So I'm no longer trying to check between emails, Slacks, PowerPoints, Excel sheets to see how my team and I are performing. So we hope this has been an interesting perspective for you on how it is we can better engage employees and drive performance in organizations. We look forward to the chance to having a more detailed conversation with you as soon as your organization is willing to take this leap forward in performance. Thank you for your time.